Hello everyone, welcome back to another GIS mathematics lecture video. In this video I want to talk about three things. I want to talk about quadrant angles, degrees, and radians. Basically in this video we're going to talk about how we actually measure or what units we use to measure angles, right? Because we said that the measure of an angle was the rotation from the initial side to the terminal side. But what are we actually using to denote that measurement? Well, there's two units. There's degrees and there's radians. I'm going to talk about the definition of both of them here, and then in the next video we'll sort of relate the two to each other. And then I want to talk about quadrant angles because quadrant angles are a special type of angle that are actually used to sort of define or give sort of key points in these two measurement systems. So first of all, let's define what a quadrant angle is. Right, what is a quadrant angle? Quadrant angle. Well, a quadrant angle is basically just any angle in the standard position whose terminal side is also on an axis. So let's break down what this means. All right, any angle in the standard position. Well, let's recap. What is the standard position? The standard position is basically just a way of saying that the initial side, which is the side that we start from when we measure our angle, is on the x-axis. It also means that the vertex, or the end point, right, that's the point that sort of defines the angle, that also lies on the origin. So assuming that the vertex is on the origin and the initial side is on the x-axis, right, that's what standard position says. Whose terminal side, again, that's the side that we measure to, right, starting at the initial side, we measure the rotation to the terminal side. We're saying the terminal side is also on an axis. That's a quadrant angle. So hopefully that makes sense. And we're going to talk about why that's important and sort of what those mean in just a second. So let's talk about measuring an angle. Right. Now, I'm not going to actually go through the process of physically measuring because I would have to have a protractor, and that's not really relevant in this case. What's more important is talking about what do measures of angles look like and what sort of units are we using to actually denote these measurements. Because again, it's just going from the initial side to the terminal side. So what I want to do is I want to talk about degrees first. Right, so the way degrees work is going from the initial side all the way around, coming back. So the initial side and the terminal side are the same. Right. Right, if the initial side and the terminal side are the same, we have defined this measurement. Right, we defined this measurement as 360 degrees. And we denote that with a little degree symbol, right? Just like Fahrenheit or Celsius, a little degree symbol up here. So let's talk about what that looks like with our little example here. So we have the 4 quadrant angles. The green one is the first quadrant angle. The red one is the second quadrant angle. The blue one is the third quadrant angle. And then you can't see the line because it's under the initial side here, but this purple point right here, this designates the fourth quadrant angle. So hopefully that makes sense. So what I want to do is I want to talk about what we mean when we say if the initial side and the terminal side are the same. So black this black line is always going to be our initial side, right? It's the positive x-axis, and our vertex is always at 0, right? That's the standard position. So what does it mean for the initial side and the terminal side to be the same? If we were measuring this angle, right, we would have to start right at the initial side. We would have to measure all the way around to the terminal side. But in this case, we end up back where we started. So if you've noticed, what we've done, right, in this sloppily drawn measurement here, is we've actually drawn a circle. But we defined this, right? This is the definition that mathematicians have created here, is that this angle that's created when you end up back where you start, right, this is 360 degrees. That's the definition that we've presented here. So let's break that down by talking about some of the other quadrant angles. And again, these are just important because they're useful sort of benchmarks. Okay. So if we define this as this being the same as this, is 360 degrees. Well, what happens if we go from the initial axis here to the terminal side being here on the positive y-axis? What does this mean? Well, if you think about it, right, this is equivalent to going 1/4 of the way all around. All right, so if you take 1/4 of 360, you get 90. Right, so this angle, right, from here to the positive y-axis is 90 degrees. And this is also often called a right angle. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm expecting degrees to be a lot more comfortable than radians. So hopefully this is making sense so far. Well, what happens if we were to go from here? This is going to get really cluttered. What happens if we go from here, right, all the way around past the 90 to here? Right, what is this angle? Well, in this case, right, we've gone 1/2 of the way around. Hopefully you can visually see that a straight line is equivalent to going half the way around. Right, we're halfway to having the terminal side be the same as the initial side. So this would be equal to 1/2 of 360 degrees, which is equal to 180. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, degrees. So this is going to be 180 degrees. So finally, right, the last sort of measurement that we need to concern ourselves with is what happens if we start at the initial side and we go all the way around past the negative x-axis to the negative y-axis, right? What is this angle here? Well, again, just like what we've done before, right? This was going 1/4 of the way. This was going 1/2 of the way. Well, this is the same as going 3/4 of the way around. So if you think about it, that's 3/4 times 360. That's the same as saying 270 degrees. So hopefully this makes sense. And then if we finish that off, right, we go back and we're back at 360 again. So again, this is just sort of the definition of what we mean when we say that degrees, we're measuring an angle in degrees. That if the terminal side and the initial side are the same, we've defined that as 360 degrees, and we can break that up at the quadrant angles for 90, 180, and 270. In the next video, I want to do the same concept, but I want to talk about degrees, and then in the next video after that, I want to relate degrees to radians. So hopefully this makes sense. And if any of this was confusing, please reach out. Thank you.